some noise for your amazing host.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sandals Church Kids, where we are all about the vision of being real with ourselves, God, and others. My name's John.
And I'm Joelle, and we are so excited that you're here with us today as we jump into a brand new series called Connect the Dots.
Okay, I've got a question for you guys. Have you ever done a connect the dots picture? Most of the time, it's hard to see how the picture is going to end up. You just have to keep following the numbers in the right order and wait until it suddenly comes together and makes sense. Sometimes, life can feel like a big connect the dots.
Most of the time, we don't really know how our life will turn out as we go. But did you know that the Bible actually tells how your life will turn out if we choose to follow God? So, do you want to see the big picture of your life? Let's check it out.
Coming up,
Find out what happens when we scratch the surface of belief.
What was that all about, and where did Mr. Coyote come from?
I wonder what surface they're really going to be scratching.
Okay, everyone, so today we're talking about Abram and what in Star Nation from our story in Genesis chapter 12 through 17. We'll learn about how God made a man named Abram some wild promises and how Abram had faith that they would actually happen. All right, John, if I were to ask you to count the stars in the sky, do you think you could do it? And what about all of you guys?
You know, I'm not quite sure. I mean, there are like a billion stars in the sky, so I don't think I could actually count them within my lifetime. There are some I can't see with my human eyes or glasses.
Well, today in our Bible story, we will see God make a big promise to Abram, and what's cool is the promise references the number of stars in the sky.
That sounds like a pretty big promise, and I can't wait to learn more. But right now, it's time for our pre-show.
Hey guys, I'm Katie, and I'm going to share something with you today. Now, we know that God tells us to share the gospel with others, but here's the deal. Sometimes it can feel a little scary, and we may not even know how to do that. Well, I've got some good news for you. I am going to show you an easy and fun way to tell people about what Jesus has done for us. It's called the 3 circles, and all you need is a piece of paper and a pencil. So let's try it together. First, you are gonna draw one circle right here on your paper, and you're gonna label that broken world. And then you can tell whoever you're telling the gospel, you probably know that the world we live in is broken or messed up. Things aren't always fair. People aren't always kind. Sometimes people get sick or hurt or are really, really sad. Sometimes people even die. Life can be confusing and hard. And then you can draw whatever you think represents or stands for brokenness in the circle you just drew. So I drew a broken line right here across the middle. And I drew someone who was mean, because sometimes there are mean people in the world, right? And I drew someone who is sad, because sometimes we get sad and that's not fun. And I drew a broken arm because sometimes people get hurt. And I drew a confusing thought because sometimes things don't make sense. And I also am gonna say that it's not fair, right? There are some things in the world that are not fair. And last, I'm even gonna draw a grave because we know that people die. And that's hard. And all of these things represent our broken world. Okay, so next we're gonna draw another circle to the left of the circle you just drew, just like this. And you're gonna label this circle God's way. And then you can tell them, but we also have good things in the world, right? It's not all bad. Some things are awesome, like loving others and feeling happy and having fun and seeing beauty like a sunset or a puppy or a pretty flower. And these things are all the way that God made the world to be, perfect and good. Then you can draw whatever you think represents or stands for the way God made the world to be. So that's all the good things, right? So I am gonna draw a heart because we know that love is good. I'm gonna draw a tree and some flowers because we know that the world can be beautiful. I'm gonna draw a happy face because sometimes we're happy, right? I'm gonna draw some laughter because we get to have fun too, and a sunset. I don't know about you guys, but I love watching sunsets. And then I'm gonna draw a puppy. Because what is better than a cute puppy? Oh man. And then you can say that God created us to live in the world following this good way. But instead, we chose to run away from God's way and do things on our own, which is the broken way. And when we do anything that separates us from God and His way, it's called sin. So to show that, we are going to draw an arrow from the circle that says God's way with all that good stuff. And we're gonna draw an arrow pointing to the broken way because that's where people go. And I'm gonna draw a little person running away from God's way and into the broken world to help me remember to talk about sin. And then you can say, now we all try to get back to God's way by doing things like trying to be perfect or becoming successful or turning to things that we think will make us happy. But none of these things actually bring us back to God. They all end up sending us even further away from Him. So now I'm gonna draw some arrows pointing out of the broken world circle away from God's way. And I'm going to label them perfection and success and things, right? Sometimes we think things will fix our problems. And I'm even gonna draw little symbols to represent them. So you can do any kind of symbols that you want. So I'm gonna draw a star for perfection and an A+ for success, and I'm gonna draw a box of stuff for things. And then you can say, but God loved us so much that He sent His Son, Jesus. And Jesus came down to earth and lived as a human and God at the same time. He was perfectly perfect, and He died on a cross because it was the only way our sin could be wiped away. And then He forgave our sins so we could finally be back with God in the God's way circle. Jesus is the only way for us to leave our broken world and get back to God's way. So now we're gonna draw our third circle right in the middle of the paper at the bottom. And we're gonna label it Jesus. And then I'm gonna draw an arrow pointing down to show that He came down to earth, right? He came down to save us. And then I'm gonna draw a cross because we know that He died for us. So I'm gonna draw a cross right here in the middle. And He even rose from the dead for us too. And then we're gonna draw an arrow pointing up towards God's way to show that He is the only way for us to get back to God's way. Now you can say, remember, we ran away from God's way for us by sinning. But Jesus made it so if we turn from our sin and believe that He died for us, He will save us. And once we do that, Jesus forgives our sins and gives us a new life where we can be back living in God's way with Him. So the last thing we get to draw is an arrow from the broken world circle to the Jesus circle. And we are going to label that turn from sin and believe. And I'm gonna draw a little person praying right here to help us remember that that's how we turn from sin and believe, by praying. Okay, so then we're gonna draw an arrow from Jesus to God's way. And we're gonna label it forgiven and new life. And that helps us remember that the only way back to God is through Jesus forgiving us. So I'm even gonna draw a little person who's running towards God this time and who's been made new. And lastly, we can ask whoever we're talking to what circle they think they're in right now. They might already know and love Jesus, so they are already living in God's way. Or they may have never heard about Jesus before, and they're still living in the broken way. So now you can ask them which circle they want to be in. If they say God's way, that's awesome. Now you can share even more about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And you can help them pray and ask God for forgiveness and tell Him that they believe in Him. If they aren't quite ready to make that choice to follow Jesus right now, that's okay too. You can keep praying for them and reminding them that Jesus loves them so much. There are lots of different ways to tell others about the good news of Jesus. Today, we learned one way. And no matter which way you choose, remember, God gave us the Holy Spirit to help us know exactly what to say and do. We don't have to get it perfect. We just have to try our best and let God do the rest. And no matter how people respond, always act like Jesus would by being kind and loving. All right, guys, that was the 3 circles, and now you have everything you need to share the gospel with others.
All right, friends, we're gonna jump into a time of worship together.
I am so excited to see these videos and learn the memory verse from Dear Enemy.
Now's a chance for you to get real with yourself and with God. Maybe you had a really rough week, or maybe you had an awesome week. Take some time right now to think about all of it. You might need to take a moment to pray, or you might be ready to jump right in.
While you worship, feel free to close your eyes, raise your hands. You might even clap and dance around. How you want to worship God is up to you. Now stand up on your feet and let's get ready to worship together.
Dear enemy, you were just a part of the plan for the hope and the future I now have. Dear enemy, my God is the master creator. Everything is better in his hands. You meant to hurt me, but God turned your evil into good. Sticks and stones. He's cooking me a feast with your fire. Yeah, he's using you to help me grow. He's pointing me to life with your arrows. He's building a throne with your sticks and stones. He's cooking me a feast with your fire. Yeah, he's using you to help me grow.
In the darkness, you are righteous. Jesus, you are the rightful King. Never changing, never failing. You've never given up on me. You will take the throne forever. All will bow and say, we will worship you forever young, forever free. So lift up a word, raise up a shout, for the God I love deserves his praises loud. So I will praise changing, never failing. You've never given up on me. You'll take the throne forever. All will bow and say, we will worship you forever young, forever free. So lift up a word, raise up a shout. For the God I love deserves his praises loud. So I will praise his name, praise his holy name, praise his name. Oh, every heart, every tongue confess the glories of his righteousness and praise his name. Oh, we might seem small singing in this room, but we aren't alone. No, we join in a choir of believers, billions strong. We sing praise his name, praise his holy name, praise his name. Whoa. Every heart, every tongue confess the glories of his righteousness and praise his name. Praise his name. Praise his holy name. Praise his name. Glory, 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 oh, glory, oh, glory, hallelujah.
All right, friends, now for the moment we've all been waiting for, our Bible story in Genesis chapters 12 through 17.
We are officially getting into the series Connect the Dots, where we'll see how even our mistakes have purpose when we follow God. We're calling this series Connect the Dots because whether we realize it or not, God is connecting all the good and bad things that happen in our lives to make one big picture that shows us who He is.
Even when we mess up, we can go from our failure to God's favor by believing and trusting that God will keep his promises to us. This week, we'll see how God is for us when we believe in him, and that means we can be for God by obeying him.
So grab a pencil and help us connect the dots.
Imagine if you were right in the middle of getting ready for bed and you were squeezing minty toothpaste right on the bristles of your toothbrush, and all of a sudden your dad gets an anonymous phone call.
So the person on the phone says that they want to build your family their very own personalized theme park. Now, this person says that they've bought a huge amount of land and they're gonna give it to you for free, and that you can make whatever kind of rides or attractions you could possibly want.
We're talking roller coasters, drop towers, bumper cars, Ferris wheels, water slides, you name it, anything and everything just for you and your family and friends.
The catch is, it's gonna take 10 whole years, and you couldn't see it until it was finished. So would you believe them? I mean, if you did, you'd probably be so excited, right? It would be so hard to wait. You might even think, wow, I'm so lucky. Why did they pick us to give this to? Did you know that something kind of like this happens in the Bible to a man named Abram? Let's check it out.
So we left off in our last series with the world in chaos after God scattered humanity all over the world when they sinned by trying to build the Tower of Babel. Then the Bible zooms in and starts to follow the path of one specific family. Now that family goes all the way back to Noah's son Shem. And then the story picks back up with Shem's great grandson
Abram. Now, Abram was a pretty normal guy. There wasn't anything super special about him yet.
But one day, God decided to make a promise to Abram. God promised Abram he would give him a big family with lots of children, lots of land where he could live and work, and to bless him or bring him a special happiness.
Time out. What's up with God's promises? Why did he promise Abram a big family and land to bless him instead of all the candy he could ever want or lots of money or something? Well, back in Abram's time, having a big family meant more security. The more children you had, the bigger your tribe was, and the bigger your tribe was, the easier for everyone to get what they needed and be protected. Okay, so what about land? Well, in ancient times, in order to make money, you had to have land. People would raise cattle like cows and sheep or grow crops like grain for food. The more land you had, the more cattle and crops you could have, and the more money you can make. Having a big family and lots of land meant that Abram would be rich, famous, and in charge of a lot. God also said that the people on earth would be blessed through Abram. And guess what? Thousands of years later, Jesus was a part of Abram's family and blessed everyone on earth by dying so their sins could be forgiven. That's a pretty amazing promise. Okay, time in.
Wow, that's pretty generous for God to do. Then God told Abram to leave his home. So Abram left, and he followed God even though God hadn't told them where they were going yet. That's kind of scary, right?
Abram's family moved away from everything and everyone they knew. A while later, God came back to Abram, and he took Abram outside to look at the stars in the sky, to remind him of the promise that he made Abram, that he would have as many children as there are stars in the sky.
And that's a lot. Like, astronomers think that there are 100,000 million stars just in our galaxy. Then God told Abram he would be for him, and he asked Abram to commit to obeying him in return.
That sounds like a great deal for Abram. I mean, let's go through the list. For number one, God would be on his side, which is a huge deal. God said that he would have a huge family, that he would have lots and lots of land, and that he would have an extra special happiness. And all he had to do in return was obey him.
So Abram made the agreement with God. Then God changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of many, to remind him of this agreement.
This story is the beginning of a new chapter in the big story of God and humanity. God made a promise to Abraham and his family that is similar to the promises he made to Adam and Eve and then Noah. God chose to bless Abraham not because of anything amazing he did, but just because he loved him. And Abraham, in turn, believed that God would do what he said, even though it hadn't happened yet.
Abraham chose to have faith, and the Bible says that his faith made him right with God. That's why when we choose to trust what Jesus did on the cross for us and believe in him, God says it makes us right with him. That's why the one thing to remember is that God is for us when we believe in him.
Believing and obeying God is kind of like this black art paper. Now, the instructions for this art paper told me that there are lots of colors underneath the surface of this paper. Do you believe that? Maybe, but you might want proof first, right? Well, to be honest, life doesn't usually give us the kind of proof we want. It's like when God asks us to believe in him. We know that God makes us the same kind of promises he made to Abraham. God promises to bless us and be for us. But he asks us to do something in return, to believe that he will do what he says, even though we can't see it yet, and then obey and do what he asks us to. It's like this art paper. I have to believe what the instructions said, even though I can't see the colors yet. But I also have to follow or obey the instructions I was given so something actually happens. For us to see this amazing art, the instructions say I have to take this skewer and scratch the surface of the paper in order to reveal the colors. I know it sounds weird, but I believe that the instructions are telling me the truth. So let's do it. glad I trusted the instructions and did what they said I should. And now I have a cool drawing of Robot Jeff. But do you know who's even more trustworthy than these instructions? God is. That's why Abraham decided to trust God and commit to obeying him. Let's take a look at today's action step. Our action step says we can be for God by obeying him.
Hey guys, my name is Tammy, and I want to tell you about a time when I was for God by obeying him. Do you know what you want to be when you grow up? When I was a little kid, I had lots of different dreams, like being a professional ballerina, or working for NASA and taking rockets to outer space, or being a flight attendant and traveling to every country around the world. I had lots of different thoughts that I wanted to do, and growing up, I started to learn a little bit more about what that looked like. And I learned that I loved the world and that I loved helping people. And so when I was in college, I went to a summer trip where I lived in Africa for 3 months, and I got to work with students there. I was a teacher, and it was really awesome. And I just learned and grew into knowing that I wanted to do something like that with my life. And so when I came back to California, I had an internship, which is like a short job, and I got to work with women in Africa and in South America. And it was so cool. I really loved what I did. But when it came to an end, I was so disappointed because I didn't know what was next for me. I didn't have a job lined up after that, and I just didn't want to do anything else. And so my boss actually came to me and said, hey, we have an open position starting. We'd love for you to interview for that. And so I interviewed, and I got a phone call later that week that said, Tammy, we want to offer you this job. And I was so excited because it was everything I was hoping for. It was exactly what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to love people around the world, and so this was perfect. So I told my friends, I told my family, and then I brought it to God. And I said, God, thank you so much for this opportunity. But there's something in me that didn't feel quite right. And I couldn't really figure it out. I was wrestling a lot. And so I spent time in prayer with God, and I continued to feel that, where I wasn't quite sure, even though it was something I loved so much. And I really just felt like God was telling me that that wasn't what he had for me, that that wasn't the job that he had lined up for me. And even though I didn't know what was coming next, I knew I had to be obedient to God in that. And so I called up my boss and I said, as much as I want to take this job, I think I need to be obedient to God and say no. And it was so hard to do that, but I really wanted to trust in what God had for me. And the craziest part about that is if I hadn't have said no to that job, I wouldn't be sitting here right now telling you this story, because now I have a job where I get to tell people all over the world about Jesus, and nothing is better than that. So I want you to know that sometimes there might be a time where you wrestle with what is next for you. You might be unsure of what God has for you, but you can trust that when you're for God, by being obedient to him, that he has so much for you, and so much better than anything you could ever plan. So you too can choose to be for God by obeying him.
Let's take a quick look at our verse for this series. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. It says, "You meant to hurt me, but God turned your evil into good." It was to save the lives of many people.
We hope you learned something new, and remember the one thing. The one thing for today is, God is for me when I believe in him.
And here is what you can do about that. You can be for God by obeying him. When we choose to obey God, we are showing our faith in him and his plan for us, and it helps us grow in trust.
Now, these are great things to think about this week, and even talk to your friends and family about.
That's right, everyone. And before we end, we're gonna go into one more worship song. Go ahead, get up on your feet, and let's check it out.
You're everything I ever needed. Everything. You're a light in the darkness. You're water for my thirst and the craziness I see. You are holding everything, oh, oh. You're everything I ever needed. All things were made through him. Nothing was made without him. In him there is life. That life is light for the people of the world. You're the light of the world. You're the light of the world. When it feels like my life is caving in, You're the light of the world, yeah. You're the light of the world, yeah. You're the light of the world. You're the light of the world, yeah. You're the light of the world, yeah. You're the light of the world, yeah. You're the light of the world. All things were made through him. Nothing was made without him. In him there is life. That life is light for the people of the world. All things were made through him. Nothing was made without him. In him there is life. That life is light for the people of the world. You're the light of the world. You're the light of the world. You're the light of the world.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today, you guys.
And one last thing before we go, you can download your Get Real guide from the button below this video so you can always go back to reread today's story.
And make sure you're following us at Sandals Kids on Instagram so you always know what we're up to.
See you next week.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Mail Time. This is the part of the show where we get to read letters from you guys. And so we've got a couple letters ready to go inside this mailbox. First thing, I'm gonna start with this one because it's small, it's compact, it's cute, and it's on purple. This comes from California from a friend of ours named Gianna. On the back, she's got a beautiful sparkly seashell sticker. It says, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Coyote, I love watching Sandals Church Kids with my sister and my dad. Love, Gianna." And Gianna, I see that you got artistic up here. A little watermelon lollipop. Now, my question for you is, do watermelon monsters eat watermelon? I don't know. There's a little watermelon up there though. Gianna, this is really, really great and super creative. I love that you watch Sandals Church Kids with your sister and your dad. Tell them we said hi, and we loved hearing from you. Thank you so much for sending us this note. We've got one more letter to look at. This one comes from a friend named Micah. Hey Sandals Church Kids, my name is Micah. I am wondering if you can find all of the sea animals in my picture. Awesome, let's do this together. He told us to find a couple of the sea creatures in his drawings. The first thing he asked us to find was some fish. I think there's a few fish. I'll give you a hint. I think that they're blue. I think I see blue fish. We've got one here, one here. We got another one here. He's very close to this huge mouth right here, so he needs to be super, super careful. Okay, the next thing that Micah wants us to find are some seahorses, and it is right there. Right in the corner, I see a seahorse. That's a great seahorse with his fun curly tail. That is awesome. And the last thing he told us to find is a blue whale. You guys see it? See if you can find it quicker than me. Boom, blue whale. Micah, that was super, super fun. I love search and finds. I definitely see some other really fun sea creatures on here. Super awesome drawing. Thank you so much for letting us play that game. I loved it. Okay, so for those of you that are wondering, hey, I would love to send some mail. I would love to see it on Mail Time, and I would love to hear from Sandals Church Kids. You can do that, and there's two ways to make that happen. So the first way is you can send us a letter through the mail by addressing Sandals Church Kids at 150 Palmerita Avenue, Riverside, California, 92507, or just send us an email at mail@sandalskids.com. Either way, we'd love to hear from you. We love hearing your questions. We love seeing your drawings or anything else you want to share with us. And don't forget, we will send you mail back. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out today, and we'll see you next time.